They usually lead things like Starry Night, and we're
Oh, they
painting Starry
do.
Night tonight. But you would be able to
Absolutely.
paint whatever you want to paint. And then we talked about all types of things in the trade show
Oh my gosh.
that came
Yes,
up.
Marty. And
Why wouldn't
even
we have like rocks for sale in the trade show and candle purveyor and also people with the stones and the waterfall company with the little tranquil waterfalls. And so this is kind of the direction people have asked, where are you guys heading with this conference? And
oh,
how to
truly.
become, and we're like, we don't know, but these are some of the ideas that have come up towards peacefulness. And when you talk about a sound bath, I mean, those are usually hosted in groovy places where they may have a salt cave, but you go to the sound bath at the music shop, they turn off all the lights and they play for like an hour, Zamfir's flute, they play the wind chimes. I've had them even gong a huge Genghis Khan gong, 2000 US dollar gong, all types of stuff. So I think a lot of opportunities are available there. And I do believe, is it Rebecca Baily is now going to come on? We'd like to throw it over to you, Dr. Elise.
So it is my absolute pleasure to see a wonderful, amazing colleague of mine, Dr. Rebecca Baily, who's been our secret special guest all these months and months and months, and I'm happy to unveil her. Welcome, Rebecca. It's very good to see you.
Thank you. It's good to see you too. I'm going to be in Australia next week, so hopefully we get to see each other. I just want to start by saying being a secret guest kept me up last night because I kept thinking, how can I pretend that I'm somebody really important? Like, can I come on as a movie star or something? Because most of your people are going to be, well, that's the most disappointing special guest I've ever met. But hopefully when you hear me, you'll understand why I said I was a special guest, why we went this way. And maybe you'll even think, okay, that makes sense. So I've got some musing, and I know you and I are going to have a little chat, but can I go ahead and launch myself?
Launch. Yes.
And before you do that, Rebecca, we do have an introductory slide from Dawn for you. So I don't want to get in trouble with Dawn.
Oh,
well,
thank you.
It is from the paperwork that you sent me, but I have a different photo, but it's a photo you used before, so I hope it's all okay. If not,
as long
I'll
as it's not like
apologize.
20 years old and I look,
No.
50
It's a good
pounds
one.
later. So
Yeah,
No,
it's
I
from
think we're good.
long ago, like 32 years ago. So. And Dawn said,
Anyway, sorry.
if you don't get this right today, I call you and detonate. So I've been living in fear
yeah.
every time. So
It is my pleasure to introduce such an inspirational and innovative psychologist such as Dr. Rebecca Baily. Rebecca Baily is a leading family psychologist and equestrian who has become a world-renowned professional teacher, speaker, author, and entrepreneur. Rebecca is the former director of the Sonoma Police Department's Youth and Family Services program, was a therapist educator for programs such as Marin County's DUI program, and is the founder of Transitioning Families, a group of independently licensed mental health practitioners dedicated to Baily's innovative ideas for helping families through crisis and difficult change. She continues to work with a variety of state and national organizations, such as the National Center of Missing and Exploited Children, and is an advisory council member of the on-site Foundation of Brain Train America. Dr. Baily is actively involved in applying Dr. Stephen Porges' research on the autonomic nervous system to her longstanding work with a variety of patients recovering from life-altering stress and traumatic experiences. She believes that understanding the interaction between the nervous system and our thoughts and actions is key to compassionately guiding families and individuals to healing and self-understanding. Along with her two colleagues, Margie McDonald and J.C. Dugard, She has founded the Polyvagal Equine Institute. Polyvagal Equine Institute offers in-person and virtual workshops, trainings, and interventions that help us to get unstuck from old patterns, think flexibly, and have effective communication with passion and kindness. As a graduate of the Wright Institute in Berkeley, California, Dr. Baily was raised in the Boston area but relocated to California 35 years ago. She now lives in Northern California with her loving husband and countless animals. Dr. Rebecca Baily, thank you so much for being here. You are our special secret VIP speaker, and rightly so. You have done a lot of good in the world, and I think that you deserve to be considered our special secret speaker. So take it away. The floor is yours.
And thank you. And that is an old picture. And some of those people I would take off at this juncture, like Dr. Oz and Piers Morgan, we might take them off our list and put in Anderson Cooper and folks like that. So let me talk to you. I'm going to start by telling you the secrecy piece. Like many of us in the field, I have been, and I think there's a glow. Let me see if I turn that off. No, that's too dark. I have been threatened. I have been numerous board complaints. I expect that my appearance here today will bring more of the lovely people. I've had my computer infiltrated. I've had pictures of children that are not mine put on the dark web, saying they're my children, and on and on and on. And you guys, we all know this. At one point, I thought, for God's sakes, why did I choose to continue in a field which replicates childhood? So, and I know some of you guys understand that. To get a context, I'm going to just say a little bit more. I been a psychologist for many years, but in 2006, I started a program called Transitioning Families. And the purpose was for non-familial abduction. And if any of you know, the recovery rate on non-familial abduction is quite slow. It's about 1% every 10 years, statistically. And so in addition to that, I got into working with familial abduction. And that's going to be pretty much the focus of what we'll be talking about. But I want to go back to, why am I here? So I'm definitely not a celebrity. I actually, when I go and do all these wonderful shows, usually they stand in the airport with a sign that says therapist. So it's always like, kind of like, I think that's me. But so I definitely do not confuse myself with the story. I will tell you that I have experienced firsthand the pain of being a family, going through this. I'm terribly old, maybe don't look quite as old as I feel today, but in 1972, my parents became embroiled in a very, very high conflict divorce in Boston. And I don't lead with this because, again, as those of you that are in the field know that everything you say is used against you. And when I do expert witness work and when I work with families, absolutely this will come up now, because I often don't talk about this publicly. So now this will be the lead of the defense attorney. Dr. Baily, are you doing this because of some childhood wound? And I am going to tell you that I am not a wounded healer. I do this work because of two reasons. One reason is because sitting there all those years ago, I knew there had to be a better way. Absolutely knew there had to be a better way. And the other piece of it is because I'm good at it. And unfortunately, I'm also going to tell you that many of the folks out there have convinced me that it's not worth it. Unless I have very, very clear court orders. The familial abductions are harder emotionally, but easier because the boundaries of the situation are clear. California is a mess right now, and I know that there's a faction that is, smacking their lips in joy because they think they have created an environment where none of this work can be done. it will change, and it's very sad because there's a lot of kids that will not have the opportunity to connect with a parent because of the law that came into be. So we can talk a little bit more. I think Doc and I can touch bases on that towards the end of this, but I want to keep going. I am a product of what in Boston they call a wicked had divorce. And I've been in California 38 years, but you can't get the Boston out of me. Every possible imaginable complication marked my parents' separation. Borderline personality, parental alienation, estrangement. I lived in a publicly humiliating world in that my parents my grandfather had been governor of Massachusetts, and we were a very old Boston family. And so Boston Globe followed the divorce and ridiculous things like this. And being a 12-year-old, it was very, very embarrassing. My mother said my father constantly told me was like Richard Nixon. And any of you know who Richard Nixon was, I'm sure all of you do, but he was known to be a pathological liar. So I was constantly told my father was just like Richard Nixon. And, you know, long and short of it, the relationship with my father, his second wife, was with my best friend's mother and my mother's best friend and blah, blah, blah. My father, on the other hand, believed that The War of the Roses was one of the best movies ever, but it had a happy ending. And if anybody knows this old archaic 1970s movie, in The War of Roses, they both die. And my father had said this was a happy ending. And so I lived in this world where I don't think either parent really should have gotten the Parent Award of the Year. Both of them were extremely self-absorbed, and their main focus was on destroying the other parent. And so when we talk about PA and other things like this, I'm always wanting to ask, what is the bigger story here? And I absolutely know that parental alienation exists. I know that there is a relentless campaign frequently, but I think it can often be very nuanced. As we all should know and agree, I've had families over the years, and honestly, to date, I've probably seen about 270 families in this program over the years. Contrary to popular knowledge, not all for the big dig, some pro bono, particularly familial abduction cases. I frequently will see them for no pay, or in the past have. But what I found when the families get here is the so-called blue ribbon for parental alienation often has an estranged other parent who has just as many problems as the other parent. Now, that's not always true. Trust me, I know that that's not always true, but I've had some of the big wigs in the field send me families with analysis and psychovals and statements and, you know, equations that show why this is parental alienation. And I'll tell you, my favorite example is this one parent came here, couldn't understand why the kids rejected. And part of the way we work here is the chef is my husband, and he'll cook food and cook with the families. So he was playing ping pong with this, you know, poor parent. And I understand the stress that families are under. But this individual didn't like that he lost and threw the ping pong mallet at my poor husband's head across the room because he didn't win. And part of what I believe in the work here, that this is a protected space. Over the years, court documents are not sent to say what goes on. And yet this was such a case that it was like, well, maybe there is something else that people ought to be looking at. So I went a little bit off my so-called script, which is not uncommon if anybody has ever heard me. So I think this is where I'm coming in this to say, that things are never really black and white. Now, the fun thing, which is not fun for the kids, but familial abduction in my mind is black and white. When one parent takes a child, steals a child from the other parent, it is child abuse, and it is very black and white. I know that there is a legitimate concern in the domestic violence community about that, about people are taken and run from abuse. And we know that exists. We can't deny that that exists. And I am a very firm believer in very strong due diligence before we weigh in. One of the challenges in our field is we have a lot of armchair quarterbacks. And in fact, there's a paper that was written about me. I won't even give the country, but it's over in your neck of the woods. It is not Australia. And it completely takes a situation that I worked on and just distorts the whole thing incredibly. And this was written by a professor in a college over there who somebody sent it to me and said, hey, check this out. And the issue in this particular case is that this was one of those 4 board complaints, went up to the 9th District Court. Everything was thrown out, including the fact that I do not put children in closets and I do not break their legs. I mean, that's insulting to say the least, but also ridiculous. But this woman published it as if it was true. So I'm showing you all of this. I'm telling you all of this, not to be completely tangential, but to say, hence, surprise guests, because I don't like fodder being out there on me to be used against me, which is unfortunate. So going back to being 9 years old in this family of high issues all over the board, I developed a coping mechanism. I became an observer. I learned to sit back, watch, analyze, and mirror the chaos that surrounded me verbally, not internally, but verbally. This skill, born out of necessity, didn't fix the situation, but it kept my head and heart somewhat protected from the conflict. I didn't know then that someday this early experience would shape my future work. I'm also going to say, some of you know, obviously, polyvagal equine, that I had a horse that saved my life. And the horse, I was lucky enough and blessed enough to live in a situation which I never knew if we were going to. My mother would cry every day and say, well, we're going to have to move. Look what your father's doing to us. But the horse lived, nevertheless, the horse lived in the backyard. And I used to get on that horse every afternoon and ride and talk to the horse about the conflict. And that horse saved my life. I'll say that to this day. Became my biofeedback machine. I would come home from difficult school. It all sounds so wow, but it was a very fancy, very small private school. And that horse would take her head and pull me to her. And, you know, I was considered somewhat of a freak in the school because my parents were getting divorced, and that didn't happen at that time in the area. So there I am. I did sometimes feel abducted by 2 parents, neither who wanted me. And that's a whole nother twist. We hear a lot about narcissism, and I do understand extreme narcissism, but what sometimes is missed is the narcissists that do not want the child for the child, but just want it for their prized possession, and to show the world what a good parent they are, etc. It has nothing to do with anything else, but, you know, having it to show. So now I am going to shift to family abduction. It is an extremely heartbreaking escalation of family conflict. I have had the gift and the unfortunate experience of being up close and personal to, I would say, 6 familial abductions where the children were taken out of state and moved repeatedly from place to place. I'm thinking of one young man, and I do change some of the presentation here to protect them, but this individual was moved I believe every 6 weeks, from place to place to place. The FBI was tracking the situation. The parent was definitely mentally ill. There's no question. And this became this child's life. When this child came back, there was actually a very rapid reconnection in a funny way. The child said, we at the time had a rental house that people could stay in. So we weren't an inpatient program, but we could say, yes, we have a place you can stay, and we'll bring in the parent when you're ready. And so this person was actually an only child and said, I'm not going to be ready forever. I'm not going to be ready forever. And the step parent had come in that this child had never met. And I will never forget it. It's 1 o'clock or 11 o'clock at night, and I get a phone call. And the kid's like, okay, I want to see my other parent now. I'm like, okay. You know, my glamorous high dids job includes at that time being able to do that. So and then the child says, I'll see them from the window. I won't see them. I said, okay. So, you know, Dad, of course, I just came over immediately. Oh my gosh, that kid opened the door, ran out, Dad. And it didn't go like that. It wasn't all like that. There was a lot of things that had been said and done. And the kid was definitely traumatized by having to move all the time. But this moment was so amazing to see. And I have seen that so many times when we are told, in the old days, and again, California is going through some changes right now, but in the old days, I would get a call maybe from a judge, and they'd say, look, the parent is incarcerated. Could you take this family? And always we would make arrangements. I would get my crew, and this is not because I'm so wonderful, it's just because what I did, you'd either get paid for it or you wouldn't. You never really knew. You know, they would come in, and particularly to me, the easier ones were the ones when that other parent was incarcerated. We had one case that was actually a pretty high profile in America, where the amount of backlash that I have gotten from that case to this day would astonish you, including a major network telling me, this was like 3 years ago, that they were still getting death threats from this particular situation. And I don't want to go into any of the details because it would be too recognizable, but put it this way, in my office, day 2, the children said, the reason we never backed up the sexual assault, you know, that it didn't happen was because you never admitted screaming at us and the other parent. And because of that, we thought you must be lying about the other thing. And that happened on day 2. And I hope that one made sense, because that one really, really embedded in my understanding of some of these cases. So, and that particular case resulted in my computer being hacked to the extent that I gave it to a major law enforcement back when I worked closer with those guys. And I said, can you tell me what's going on? Is there a virus? And they said, well, yeah, there was, but it's now infiltrated us. So whoever, I mean, this particular situation was very, very intense. So I know I'm meandering a little bit. Forgive me. It's 7:30 here, and I know it's 1:30 in the morning here, and so some of you may already be asleep. But I want to go back a little bit more. So in addition, and sometimes I forget all the things that have happened. In addition, I did a summit with the National Center of Missing and Exploited Children with, I think it was 12 or 13 returning children or adult, about 18 or 19-year-old, that had been taken by their parent and returned. And it was a very powerful experience. I wish we had written it up. It was a 3.5 days. And a couple of things that we saw during that was how much the children or the young adults wanted the other parent to forgive the parent that had taken them. And the ability for the parent who had been the left behind, or whatever the verbiage we want to use for that, to forgive was immense, because they were so grateful to have their children back. And that really stuck with me. And at that time, a very good friend of mine who's in the field, we both said, what's interesting about familial abduction is rarely would that left behind parent ever think of doing such a thing to the other parent, which is interesting, I think, and I think very true. Doc, do you want in? I mean, I have plenty more things to say right now, but
yeah, I just wanted, just on that note, I know you and I have spoken previously about your thoughts and my thoughts. They're very aligned about parents who take a child overnight into an area where it's hard for the other parent to get to them. It's hard for the other parent to see them. And I remember having a conversation how we label that abduction, even though a lot of the general public think that's very normal to do that. It's perfectly okay to do that. And we're very much on the same page about how we're no. And I'm just seeing it all the time, and the police have no powers to bring back the child a lot of the time. And the courts, even though they're ordered to bring the children back, a lot of the time they just don't come back. So I just wanted to sort of hear your thoughts on that too.
well, it's important because I forget that I'm also a member of MIKK, the mediation group out of Berlin, and their model is to try to get both parents together to mediate, and yet the system there tries to set up for that. In the US, it is so difficult because of the litigation. And then we have the issues of Hague, which many people embrace. And as you guys know, ironically, the US hasn't signed it themselves, which I always find sort of ironic. I absolutely believe that abduction should be treated as a crime. You know, how you adjudicate it doesn't necessarily mean everybody gets thrown in jail, for sure, but you need to respond to it because it is child abuse. What happens is the stories, particularly in some of these families I've worked with where the kids have moved and moved and moved, they internalize this sense of dis-ease and anxiety. And when I say dis-ease, I mean dis-ease, anxiety. Their stories that they're told are about the other parent. It's not as simple as show a picture. And yet, as I've said over and over, I've seen these kids, when they get back with the other parent, respond very quickly, particularly if they've been in the care of a mentally ill parent. Absolutely. I mean, I've had kids here where the other parent has to wear 7 oven mitts to serve them dinner because they have been told so many stories about the other parent. So I don't want anyone to think I don't know about that, because trust me, I have seen it. But the pain and the impact of abduction is so multifaceted. And when you have the opportunity to unpack it, I hate to say this, but particularly when one of the parents is given the clear message that what you did was a crime, it allows the child to feel safe enough to reconnect. I am not believing that every parent should be thrown in jail forever. And I do think we need to do due diligence on safety. And we need to do a way better job on that, of ascertaining, is this other parent safe? So does that answer it, sort of?
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, because I was reading that the global figures, like there's millions of children reported missing each year, and in the United States alone, over 200,000 children are victims of family abductions annually. Like, what do you think about that figure?
I think that makes sense. And I will tell you that there is also some thought that the non-familial abductions, many of them that are never recovered, I learned this early on, are likely parental or familial. And so as some of you will know, I've worked on some true quote unquote stranger abductions, but they're very rare. So statistics are probably higher than you think. Often, back when I did a lot of this work, I'm talking like 2 families a month, I would say when a parent would call, the first thing you need to do is report it to the National Center of Missing Exploited Children and get a number. Because if you don't, when the police come in, they're not going to do anything unless you have this registration with the National Center. I don't know how that stands right now. I know, as in every country, any organization, and believe me, I love a lot of the folks there, but any organization that has a political connection tends to go where the wind goes. And so suffice it to say, despite one of my very good friends being very high up there, I have never in a long time felt supported in my stance that this ought to be reported. I think we need to set up an opportunity like MIKK does for mediation for some of these families. But I'm going to tell you another one of a young man who was taken out of state by one of the individuals. There's a documentary about a cult where it's called Mother God, where the woman was dead and the cult figures drove her around the car for 3 weeks to get her somewhere else. Well, this young man, little boy on the spectrum, autistic, was being taken to meet up with that group. Thank God the police responded the way they did, and they got this kid back. And this kid came so frightened because, in addition to the abduction prior, the child had been convinced that the parent, and this is the new thing, and I do believe it's the mental illness of the parent. The new thing is that the COVID shot is trying to poison you. So this child had been told, and this is like the 3rd child that I've had a young person told that COVID shot is going to kill you. They're trying to kill you. And this is what that child believes. And this particular child came back, and I'm not laughing at the child, I'm laughing at all of us, running around screaming at the ranch. We have another place that sometimes I work that's 5 acres, and this young person was running around, and we're like, what are we going to do with this? And within a couple days of stability with the other parent, if you saw this child now, you wouldn't recognize them, but they were so frightened. And then when I watched this documentary, I had no idea. I didn't put the lines together. And I watched this documentary and I was like, oh my God, this was the situation this child was living in. This child was also in a situation that even after the abduction, the father had to go to court to get this kid's cat from the grandmother. The kid's cat that had been the cat the whole time, because the grandmother refused to give it back. And I thought, okay, this is where we have deep intergenerational pathology that could have been pretty easily identified. I mean, that's one of the problems. We have understandably, a lot of criticism on custody evals, and I understand it. They're super expensive. They're not particularly, from what I've seen, that accurate with many of the families we've seen, but you've got to have eyes on some of these families. And the ones that I've seen, it's interesting, that have been returned, the pathology is so deep on that other side. The other piece I'll say on that is that, and this is just an opinion. I also wonder about traumatic brain injuries on some of these individuals that act this way. And I don't hear anyone really talking about that. Now, the domestic violence people rightfully will say, is that because of head injury at the hand of the perpetrator? Maybe, but we've got to look in deeper. We sort of stopped looking at familial abductions back when Johnson and Kelly did their seminal paper on it. We stopped really saying, what is this? What do we see on both sides as we got polarized into the PA world? 15 years ago, the PA people loved me. They were like, oh, I'm the darling of them. And then when they realized that I saw multiple sides to stories, I was no longer the poster child of affection. So why do I say that? I say that I do think that familial abduction, I think that if we don't take it more seriously and don't look at it as a crime that needs some sort of a response, we're going to keep seeing this escalating. And I don't think that The Hague is doing the job it needs to at all, at all. I mean, I was doing a support group and international support group. And, you know, what I saw is people with their cases hanging in The Hague courts forever. And, you know, by the time they actually would get their kid back, things would be there would be that much damage if indeed they even did get the children back.
So what would you say to the general public who are watching all these separations and align, you know, down at the soccer club, and there's one parent over there getting everyone to align with them and denigrating the other parent? What would you say to people, the general public, who are believing a lot of the stories that are being told in narratives throughout all of these conflict situations with children? You know, like, what would you say to them?
Well,
they don't seem to be noticing to me.
Unfortunately, it's not the general public. It's our profession as well. I cannot tell you how many therapists over the years I've had to go to battle with. Like, what do you mean that dad is a severe narcissist? You've never met him. You're talking with mom, you know? And then those, and there are good therapists, please believe me. There are some really good ones, but instead of like, stay in your lane and do your work with the person in front of you. So I absolutely believe. So the person at the soccer field, I know exactly what you're talking about. Because I'm a polyvagal, and anyone that doesn't know polyvagal, Dr. Stephen Porges has the polyvagal theory, and it's all about the autonomic nervous system. He's become a very good friend of mine. And what he has taught me is the absolute importance of our own self-regulation and co-regulation. So as a bystander on the soccer field, when you're hearing this story, it is your obligation to say, I hear you, you know, how are the kids, you know, whatever. Because I will also tell you, I have learned so much from all these kids we've seen over the years. They just want a protected, safe space somewhere with somebody. Now, there are the ones that like are so embroiled and, you know, cathected to this other parent because they're worried about them or whatever that is. But we all have to be adults. And so when you find yourself hearing part of the story, at some point, there needs to be this statement of like, enough. I will tell you that I went through a divorce. I've been remarried 28 years, happy as a clam, but it was a very difficult time in my life. I was pregnant and had a 2-year-old. And at one point I had to ask people to stop telling me things about my ex-husband. I had to just say, stop. I don't want to know that you saw him at this concert. I don't have an interest. Now, wasn't I an angel the first 2 years? No, but I do know from my own experience, I did not. And I've checked in with my 30-year-old children, my 28 and 30-year-old. I said, did I ever really poison you guys against dad? And they've reassured me, no, you really never did. You always said, I'll always love him because he gave me you. And they roll their eyes when they say it. There was a time that I thought, I'm going to go back to Boston. That's where there's, you know, power in my family, and I'm gonna leave California, and I know I could have legally done it. I could have, but no chance would I have done that, because they needed to have their own experience with their dad, who's not a terrible person. But
how very normal range of you.
Well, and I really did. I mean, that's why I love adult kids, because they do tell you the truth. And I've checked in a few times, but it was really intriguing. Although my son has often said to me, "Well, you should have gone to Boston. I like Boston better than California." So what I'm trying to say is the impulse to run is what anyone who's been through a divorce, particularly if you're a child of a high conflict divorce, you're like, I'm going to get my suitcase and get out of here, but you know better. Now, when you have a violent psychopathic ex, and I call psychopath because I'm not talking about the parent. I mean, certainly there are the very violent parents, but to me, anyone that breaks the law on some level has those tendencies. It is very challenging. You don't have the money, they do. They have the big lawyers. But you've got to figure out another solution. You've got to figure out a solution for your kids. It is not easy. The courts are all askew right now. They really are. As I said, in California right now, you cannot do reunification with the other parent unless the kids want to, which I have some problems with. And I will also tell you that there has been out of control programs in California with unlicensed therapists who, and not just California, New York as well, where kids are sequestered, put away, locked. They don't know where they are. They're not beat, they're not starved, but they don't know where they are, and they're very, very scared. And I think we do need some limitations in the profession. I would absolutely embrace a body that looks at programs like the program that I did for so many years. Absolutely. Because we can all see the Zimbardo effect that comes into these programs. And if you guys don't know the Zimbardo effect, I think most of you probably do, but that's where somebody's in a position of power and then gets more and more powerful in the position. We see that happen. I feel like I've gone all over the board. I'm sorry.
No, it's fascinating. It's very, very interesting to hear from your point of view.
Oh no, you are on a roll, girl. You do it.
Truly.
I get in my ATV and I go off-roading.
No. There would be no.
Yeah, I'd like to jump in here too.
Yes, Dawn, go ahead.
I'm just listening on the edge of my seat with everything you're saying and just all the things that you talked about. One of the important things that was definitely rang true for me was when I would talk to people about I was abducted by a parent and they would tell me, well, so what? It's your parent. And that is such a devastating, it's like a sucker punch when you hear that as a child. It's like the worst thing you could literally say to somebody that has suffered through so much trauma that I ended up burying that and not talking about it because it meant trouble. I was ostracized from an entire community for trying to bring it up. So I just wanted to kind of like highlight that because you mentioned that, but it is such a huge thing for abducted survivors that are also that may have the parental alienation side of things. Yep. I think the abduction is actually an additional layer it's just elevated. It's even more of it is an alienation tactic.
The alienation word has become so politicized over here that I just like, ugh. And I know why we use it. I understand why we use it. I try not to, only because I'm just sick of being a walking target. What you just said is so important. And the other thing that perked in my thinking was when a parent takes another child, there's a certain level of trust. So I'm thinking about these two kids that were here. This was a pro bono very poor family. And the two boys trusted this parent when the parent said that there's toxic fumes coming out of the heater that will kill you in your other parent's house. And so things like that are they're very malleable that way. And it also speaks of the mental illness in the other parent. And like that should be recognized, understood, and addressed. You know, as important as the special interest groups for DV, which I don't have anything against. I do have something against when they hear one side of the story and publish these horrible things about other programs, or about people without really checking out the full picture. I mean, I think the thing, like Doc, you and I know, is that we see the whole picture and we're like, wait, there's all this and this, but we can't ever say anything about it. This is the first time I've ever come out in 35 years and said, let me tell you there's another story. I've never done that. When I've had to testify as an expert witness, of course I do. But I just, to our peers, I haven't. So back to what you said, absolutely the fear factor. And I cannot even tell you how many people over the years in passing will mention, oh yeah, my father or my mother took me for 5 years. I remember the very first time, it was 28 years ago. Well, in my book, Safe Kids, Smart Parent, which is probably out of print these days, I do talk about being 16 and being in Mexico and meeting this little boy who was being hid there. Well, he was 17, cute little thing, you know, I was 16 and this cute little boy is talking to me and my friend. And it turns out he was abducted by his dad. And he told us the whole story. And then we were going to meet him at the market. The next day we went and he wasn't there. And I remember going, oh my God, you know, like it was in a Europeanized, it was in San Miguel de Allende. Any of you know that? It's a very European area of Mexico. But this dad had been living there for 5 years and nobody knew he was there. So, and this kid, you know, I felt for him. I mean, he didn't have a normal life.
It's really interesting that you say that, because I remember the neighbors across the road, two of the girls, no, they moved in with their father and then they disappeared. And it was interesting because we were abducted children. And then I was thinking, God, I wonder where he's taken them. They've just disappeared. There were police everywhere. And I just remember thinking back then, God, I hope they were right. Never saw them again. None of us ever saw them again. But none of them realized that we were also abducted. It's like, how common is this?
I think it's so much more common. And I think, you know, you guys see the donkey. That's the ass that I have in my office to remind me to not make assumptions all the time. Because when we make assumptions, you know, it makes an ass out of you and me, but that's like my favorite thing in the world to say because it's true. And we don't know. We really don't know. It is daunting when you slow down and inquire and people tell you the stories. I just, you know, I have so many of like the toxicity of what happened when the child was taken. And I'm going to go back to the professionals. In one situation, these kids were hid on a horse ranch of a very religious horse ranch, because these people believed that one of the parents was trying to murder the children with no evidence whatsoever. And now that I've said it, this will probably reunite them out of the slime and come after me again, because it's been one of the nastiest things I was ever involved in. But amazing to me, because this particular program, the horses were not religious, the program was, and I have nothing against religion. I'm just saying that, you know, it was a very well-meaning, focused program, really believed what they were doing. They were focused on it. They made an assumption, and these poor kids were hidden there and actually made to do manual labor for free the whole time they lived there for a year, but and never could be talked about after. And that's the other thing that makes it really sad. That's the other thing. People say, why don't you have people do testimonies for your program? Again, I want you to know, please don't send me families. The only families I will ever do is have to be so clear cut, and I'm really trying to not do as many. Try not to do them at all because the toxicity of the legal stuff is so hard. But I'm going to say the reason I don't have testimonies is people, after they go through it, don't want to have to relive it publicly. They don't want to be known, just like me. I never wanted to be known as the child of the high conflict divorce. I had no desire. It was sucked enough to be at, to be 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16 known like that. And so I do not define myself as a child of a complex case. I don't. What I learned was how messed up we are in our treatment models. That's really what I learned. And the more money you have, of course it is, really. I think that's probably not true in DV. I think the less money you have, the more difficult it is to have somebody listen to you. And so I want us to always consider all the different sides.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much.
Might I ask a question? Just a quick one.
Yeah.
Dr. Baily, could you tell us on the hierarchy, because we have the mental health area, the physical doctor, the judicial system, the government, the social working, and if there is a level of where to begin with this, where would you start? Is it?
I really believe in the legal system. The problem is in the US, attorneys run the show. And sometimes that's a good thing, and sometimes it's a very bad thing. I have seen incredibly wealthy families with the kids almost being held hostage by the attorney fighting too, because there's so much money, nobody cares. We had one case that came here where it cost them, we didn't know this until they came, $1 million to get the litigation to get to our program. And this particular family had billions of dollars, so that was nothing for them. I remember talking to one of the kids, and the kid literally looked and said, well, I'm really not that concerned. When I'm 19, I get $1 million, 1.5 billion. And we were like, ha ha, and then when we spoke to the parent, they're like, well, yeah, that's true. So like, oh my God. So where am I going with this? I think Hague needs to be revisited. I think programs like MIKK are really good. I really do. Where they have, a therapist and a mediator. Go ahead.
Can you explain what MIKK means and what? Give us a little bit of context.
And I may even be getting the letters wrong because my dyslexia screws everything up. It's the mediation. It's attorneys and therapists. So they always have two people on a case. I did their training many years ago because, as you guys know, particularly if you're from European countries, the borders are so close. And so this happens a lot more. And so what they say is you have to sit down and work this out. Now, I haven't followed the data on how effective it's been over the years. I do know that there is some resolution when you say you need to sit down and work this out. This is on you. That is not what happens in abduction. What happens in abduction is one parent unilaterally says, I'm going to make the decision. Special interest groups often get one side of the story and promote it. So I absolutely think the legal piece needs to do it. But the attorneys, the judges, man, they get under attack. And they often don't have all the data they need either. I really believe that our program often got the most accurate because we'd have 5 days to a week with people right in front of us. And day 2, you see all the dynamics very quickly, right? Like the one I saw where I talked about the kids saying, well, if you had just told us that you did yell, we would have known that when, the other parent accused you of sexually assaulting us, that they were lying. It was as simple as that. It went boom, day 2, boom, boom, boom. Because when you're in court, everybody presents good, right? And often a parent is backed into the corner where, like, I don't know, I'll be honest, I raise my voice at my kids sometimes. I never hit them, but I raised my voice, and sometimes it wasn't fair, right? You know, sometimes I
How normal.
my temper. But if I'm in court and somebody was, at me for being yelling, I probably would have said, well, no, I don't really think I raised it that hard. I'm just saying, I don't know. So we need to know that when we're under a microscope, we're certainly not going to be as realistic as you can be when people are right in front of you. We
Yeah.
also need
So,
better training. Yes, go ahead.
sorry, in my research, I captured a lot of what the judges are actually like. They're being threatened, death threats, all sorts of stuff, and the vicarious trauma that they're experiencing, and how it's very hard for them to get supervision themselves, and who do they talk to. And one of the clinical psychologists that I spoke to in the interviews said that after one big family law case, they were all so traumatized. It had gone on for so long that like both sides, including the magistrate and all the lawyers, all went out for dinner and just licked their wounds all together. And I think this is something a lot of people don't realize, that trauma on the professionals who are trying to help the families is off the charts, and they're leaving in droves.
Yeah, so you'll love this. So, and it's funny because part of what we do with Polyvagal Equine Institute is we've had 4 retreats with the National Council of Juvenile and Family Court Judges, where they come and they talk and they support each other, and then they do some equine work around their own nervous system. So you are 100% right. The biggest fear is the fear of the front page in New York, in America, because during COVID, I had the opportunity to provide support to some judges, and I don't want to go into anything because it was so precious, about exactly what you're talking about, because they, and there was a thing that came out, I just interrupted myself, but there was a study that came out I saw today on some, when I did not sleep last night because I was so horrified that I was a special guest. I was like, oh, I'm going to be so disappointing to everybody when they see that I am not like, I don't know who. But anyways, there was a study that came out on AI. It was an AI-based one that looked at the words that judges use. And there's some really bad judges that say things like, you deserved it, and all of this stuff. I do feel we're changing. Organizations like the National Council on Juvenile and Family Court Judges are changing they're changing it a bit. They really are. They're doing, Monday morning moments to try to help with that. And they're also doing some education. But we need better training. Graduate schools don't have any education in high complex in the US.
And Rebecca, may I ask a question?
Yes.
With what you just mentioned, how much of that negative commentary towards people is male driven? Because there's a lot of male judges, like, you're to blame and that type of crap.
I think in this study it was male. I will also tell you there's also a certain amount of women that are not necessarily flexible into their approach with other women, But I mean, we live in a very misogynistic, ridiculous world. I think what I've been seeing, and it's a very wise question, at our retreats, like the last one was all women. The time before had more men. But so I think at least in the US, the National Council of Juvenile and Family Court Judges, I am seeing maybe the women changing the culture a bit. Absolutely. Also, interestingly, some randomly was on a radio broadcast for the New Zealand case that just happened. I never knew what happened. And, they asked me all sorts of questions. And I really, it was just so interesting to be called to do a middle of the night broadcast for them. But I talked a lot about the hi Brandy, I see you. A lot about that situation and how we really had to consider an abduction. Brandy, do you know that case well? You're muted. I know you're coming up soon, so I want to hear you.
Yeah, I just asked her to unmute. Oops, did you mute?
And then unmuted.
Unmuting. Sorry. I hope I didn't do that.
Okay. Yes, I briefly ran across that, scouring the internet to try to find any way to help my case and case laws and things that will help me understand what's going on in family law with mine. So when you said when you named it, I'm like, yeah, I heard that one, but I didn't deep dive into it, but I'm ready to hear your
Brandy,
commentary.
where are you from? And I'm sorry, I'm not going to be able to watch today because I'm getting ready to go to Australia and I got so much to do till I go. But Brandy, where are you located?
So I'm located in Tinley Park, Illinois, right outside of Chicago.
Oh,
And to
the
all my
area
Aussies, good day, mate.
and Brandy, that area where that judge got in such trouble 6 years ago with I felt so badly for that judge that came down really hard on the other parent. And the thing is, we do not have the special interest groups in this country are so fixated, whether it's alienation. I'm sorry to say it, I probably offended somebody terribly, but whether it's the alienation group, the DV group, whatever it is, they're so myopic that they are and so vocal and are so ridiculous to not listen to experts like all of us, who many of us have been through it, have studied it, have worked in the field, and are really not agenda driven. Like, that's one of the reasons I love the doc so much here, because I don't feel like she's agenda driven. Maybe I haven't seen that side, but I think we are both about
the child psychological. I've got my light on the child, nothing else. That's it.
Yeah.
And
yeah.
And I would like to say, like, coming in from the parent in all, I've been to every organization as far as the pros and the cons, because I needed to align myself with information to help myself and others. And what I've seen is you're right. People have gotten so lost in, oh, people use DV or parental alienation as a silver bullet, but then you have the organizations that saying, no, we are, like, as far as me, I am a domestic violence victim. My children are parentally alienated, and I was as a child too. So it's the behaviors for me that I you know, how did I say, I align with domestic violence and parental alienation. And yes, I hear from the other side that says, oh no, that's junk, that's junk
right
terminology, but because someone has used that terminology against them, and instead of listening to the behaviors, they just took that terminology and just devalued it and tried to fight against it, when what we really need is to get the judges and the attorneys to look at the behaviors. Let's not focus on the wording and the terminology, because that keeps us fighting against each other.
Yeah,
But the behaviors.
Yeah, I agree. And I'm going to say something I wasn't intending, but I'm going to say it. And I know I have like 2 minutes. In my home, there was absolute DV and child abuse. Two different parents doing two different things. And I was not technically safe anywhere but with my horse. That's all I can say. And so I do, neither of the parent, I don't know, I don't quite get it, but one parent, absolutely, one of the parents DV to the 10th degree, other one beating the crap out of me with a riding crop, periodically pulling my hair, hitting me, all this stuff. And I was in a very privileged home, so nobody. I mean, I used to go to school and not want to lean back because my back hurt because I had welts on it. But, that didn't happen in my world. And so I don't know who would have been the better parent. I knew the parent I stayed with wasn't safer for me, but the other parent the parent I stayed with had the horse. The other parent was not safe with the other parent. And again, I don't lead with that. I don't want to be put on the stand and have someone nail me on that. I agree with you. You look at the behaviors, and the problem is, the big question is, what if neither parent is up to the job?
Yeah.
Okay, we gotta stop. I know.
Okay. Final comments. Anybody? Thank you so much. I know I personally asked you to come and do this conference, and you stepped into the space, and it's very, very difficult. And one of the things that came out of my research was 50% of the mental health practitioners who I interviewed all had lived experience. So that's very powerful. And when I told another therapist, 50% have lived experience, she was mortified that they'd actually come forward and said that. So I think the tide is changing. I think people with lived experience, we can show, we can do the work, we can understand it, we've got a completely different perspective. We can be children of this stuff, we can be specialists in this field, we can be researchers, we can be a lot of different things and still talk about it and still help the children who are coming through. And you've just helped in a huge way to another little piece to that puzzle, Rebecca, and I really, from the bottom of my heart, am very, very grateful that you've come.
Well, I better see you over there in the next week. Hopefully you're going to come see me.
My calendar's empty because of that. So
good. And you guys just keep your eye on the guy behind me. I've been leaning away from it because I accidentally did this, but that's it. Let's, don't make, just ask, be curious, compassionate, carry on. Thank you guys so much. Delightful.
I want to say something real quick before you go.
Anybody but you. Yeah.
Before you go, I just want to tell you, thank you so much for your patience and your kindness and just being here and being part of this very important day for all of us, and that you're part of this is really special. And I just wanted to take a minute to just recognize that we feel your experiences as well here. And I want to highlight the fact that we're all adult survivors, and that's why we're bringing this conference to the world, so that they can hear from us, because those voices will make such a huge difference in how the attorneys and the judges are looking at cases that are current. How is our law enforcement looking at conflicts when they're called out to a home? Are they looking at the child? Are they looking at two people fighting and the child's lurking in the corner? We want the officers to identify with the child, to see them and their pain and protect them. And that's why it's so important.
Yeah, and we ought to do more training. I've done some law enforcement training, and I never really thought about doing it around this issue. By the way, Hurricane Milton is nothing compared to the energy of this conference.
That's right. You can't even take me out. I'm still here. I may not be on video, but I am here.
Okay, stay safe, my dear. You guys, I got to bounce out of here.
Thank you so much.
This all.
Thank you.
Take care. Bye.
Bye for now.
And this book called Warning, Children Are Not Weapons, it is a best-selling international bestseller right now, so that's very exciting. And it's unveiling the hidden truth of child psychological abuse related to parental and family alienation and abduction. And it's written by adult survivors. A lot of these authors are here on the panel today and tomorrow. It's a collection by Dawn McCarty and also contributing authors. I just want to share a little bit more about the book. In a world of invisible wounds of child psychological abuse remains unspoken, this book dares to shed light on a reality many have struggled in the shadow to survive. And Warning, Children Are Not Weapons is not only a testament to resilience, but a call for societal change. It brings forth stories of courage, healing, and urgent need for systematic reform. And that's really important because it's not only teaching, it's also giving hope. It's giving hope and a voice. And, this is trailblazing, which is not easy, but it needs to get in the hands of those who are making decisions to these children, which is attorneys and doctors and also parents. Let them rethink. If they're the ones that are the offender, let them rethink. And even the parent, like we had earlier, Joanne, even if you're
Dr. Elise Price-Tobler has completed 2 twin PhD studies. The first is called Working with Adult Child Survivors of Severe Parental Alienation Abuse, Survivors and Mental Health Practitioners' Perspectives. This delves into the complex challenges regarding current treatments within this field. She conducted a thorough international study involving interviews with adult child survivors of severe psychological abuse and 10 of the world's foremost expert mental health practitioners specializing in severe parental alienation and abduction. Her efforts have culminated in developing an innovative, soon-to-be-published treatment protocol. Dr. Elise has decided to share her PhD studies with the world by publishing them in books. This way, anybody can access her studies and use them toward improving upon and developing future studies and protocols that will advance her work even further. Book 1 is called Disrupting the Intergenerational Trauma Cycle of High Conflict Divorce. This is a guide for mental health practitioners and adult survivors of child psychological abuse related to severe parental alienation. Book 2 is called Navigating the Maze During Treatment of Adult Survivors of Child Psychological Abuse or Severe Parental Alienation. This is a comprehensive resource guide for mental health practitioners offering insights, strategies, and risk mitigation from a PhD thesis on the challenges faced by practitioners treating adult child survivors. Book 3 is coming soon, which will be the treatment protocol based on her research studies.